On this episode of The Bourbon Captain, we'll be pitting bourbons created by two contemporaries, Elmer T. Lee and Charles W. Medley. Can the copy stand up to the original? Stay tuned and let's find out. Welcome to The Bourbon Captain. Here we are again today with a head-to-head that features a small brand with close ties to one of the big boys, Wathen Single Barrel against Elmer T. Lee Single Barrel. In a minute, I'm going to tell you a story that you probably have not heard before about the connection between these two brands. But first, I'd like to remind you why we're here. What we're trying to do on this show is compare bourbons to give you a better feel for how to advance on your bourbon journey. I do not know what clover or pine bark taste like, and I'm not going to pretend that you should either. What we'll do is have a conversation that'll help you make some great choices when you're in the store. If you enjoy our content, please like, subscribe, and drop a few comments down below to let us know if there are comparisons you'd like to see. Here's the backstory on today's comparison. For years, the Elmer T. Lee bottle was my unicorn. Looked everywhere for it. I loved what the man did for the industry, and the fact that he's got a bourbon, it's a single barrel, it's distilled at Buffalo Trace, count me in. So I looked everywhere, every top shelf, behind every counter, even in the bourbon museums that just exist to extort us. I'd find the bottle here and there, $300, $400, way too much money. Finally, within 2 weeks of each other, I found the bottle twice, in Georgia and Maryland. It was around $200, which felt like too much money, but I was looking for that bottle and thrilled to find it. In the midst of my search for Elmer, I came across the Wathens brand. I was in a store in Bardstown, Kentucky, and I asked the manager where I might be able to find some Elmer. He took one look at me and said, "Hey, if you enjoy Elmer, I've got something for you. Wathen Single Barrel." I had never heard of it or really paid any attention to the brand, but he was very excited to tell me the story about how Charles Medley worked closely with Elmer. He was an understudy, and eventually Medley went out on his own, and Wathens was his product. The two remained close over the years, sharing strategies, insights, even glass suppliers. And I felt pretty good that I was walking out of the store with the next best thing. Except none of it was true. Well, maybe the part about the glass suppliers. These bottles are identical. As far as the relationship between Medley and Lee, to the best of my research, the two collaborated on nothing, shared no secrets. Am I disappointed? No way. Let me tell you why. That store manager down in Bardstown, and I remember who you are, pulled one hell of a sales job on me. In the finest traditions of the bourbon industry, he told me a story that made me want to be a part of these brands. In the immortal words of Elwood Blues,
"It wasn't lies, it was just bullshit."
There is a sad aside to this story. While it's true that Charles Medley didn't ride Elmer Lee's coattails to fame, the sad thing is he didn't need to. Charles Medley is a seventh generation master distiller, and he cut his teeth at the famed Brown-Forman and Old Fitzgerald distilleries. Charles Medley didn't need to ride anyone's coattails. He's in the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. Now that's a story I can buy into. So, where were we? So I found my Elmer, and when I think about the big boys of Kentucky bourbon, I think about Colonel Taylor, Booker No, Jimmy Russell, and I've got to include Elmer as my fourth on the Mount Rushmore of Kentucky bourbon. Every time one of us drinks a single barrel, we need to tip our cap to him because he literally invented the category. Now, let's get these two in the Glens and do the real comparison. Let's get into the comparison of these two bourbons. First up, we've got the Elmer. I can see right now, nice dark coloring there. It comes in at 90 proof. It's aged around 12 years. They don't state it on the bottle, but good information has it around there. It's Buffalo Trace's mash bill number 2, which a lot of really great whiskey comes from. That's a rich nose. Very good there. Wow, that's very enjoyable. A lot of flavor there. It comes busting through. I'm a sucker for cherry, and I really get it on the finish with the Elmer. Enjoy that. Let's move to the Wathens. First thing that'll jump out at me, I don't know how well it comes through on the camera, much lighter. There's a huge difference in the coloration there. Wathens comes in at a similar 94 proof. They don't state the age on the bottle either, but information has it that it's somewhere between 4 and 9 years. But you can see it looks like a much younger bourbon. On the nose, I'd call it thinner. Doesn't portray a lot of flavor there. Let's give it a taste. Yeah, yeah, thinner is what I'd go for. I do get some nice flavor to it, but definitely nowhere near the richness or the depth of flavor that I get from the Elmers. So where I land on these two bottles, I think it's safe to say they don't share anything in common. There's a lot of rumors on where Wathens is distilled, and one of those is at the Buffalo Trace Distillery. I don't believe that. I've also heard Green River. The rumor that I probably believe the most is that it comes from the Glenmore Distillery, which is also in Owensboro. The bottles are the same. They're both single barrels, and both guys are in the Hall of Fame. But to me, that's where the comparison ends. So, one thing that we did learn today, never trust a guy that's trying to sell you a bottle of bourbon. There's a lot of myths, legends, history in the bourbon industry, and there's also a lot of bullshit. But that's the fun, and there's a beauty in that. The last thing I'll say, when I initially bought the bottle of Elmer's, I was honestly a bit underwhelmed. Okay, the it was bourbon, the flavor was there, but it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't the unicorn I thought that I had found. I did like it, but I put it back on the shelf. I didn't tell anybody that story. It's not that cool to go around telling your buddies you dropped a car payment on a bottle that probably sits in the middle shelf somewhere. So I put it away, didn't think about it for a while. Our producer came over one night and he said, "Hey, I've got something I want you to try." He stepped into the bourbon room, brought this out in a Glen, and in the blind, he said, "Give it a try, see what you think." He thought he had me stumped. I gave it a scent, put it on the nose, gave it a taste. I thought, wow, that tasted a lot like one of the best that I've ever had, E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof. And I said, wow, the proof isn't there, but that sure tastes a lot like Taylor Barrel. And when he told me, yep, I was shocked. It was the Elmer. Whether it had to do with getting opened up, sitting on the shelf a while, airing out a little bit and opening up that night, whatever it was, the flavor came through fantastic. The lesson in that I think we can all learn is if you get a bottle and you're not overwhelmed with it at first, you know it's a good bottle, you've been told, and it doesn't strike you right away, put it on the shelf, give it a little time, come back to it. Sometimes that first taste isn't everything we want it to be. Some people will call that a neck pour. I don't believe in the neck pour, but I do believe that the first time you try a bourbon, it may not live up to what you're expecting. And that might be because of what you had for dinner, what else you've been drinking, how much you've been drinking. A lot of factors go into it. But I learned a lesson that if you come back to a good bottle, rather than giving it away or giving up on it, a lot of times you're going to be pretty happy with what you find. And I am. That's fantastic. Thank you all very much for joining. We hope you found this useful. Until next time, this is the Bourbon Captain. Out.